Is happening on the edge of some serious heat, and people who don't have air conditioning tonight, it's going to be a tough go for sleeping.
It really is. You know, the temperatures along with the moisture content that's just really excessive across this region. Those are going to be some of the fuel that's going to keep these storms going and help them to hold together through the overnight hours tonight.
Yeah, seeing some of those dew points in the lower 80s. It's brutal. So the temperatures are not going to cool down much more than that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was kind of a little trick.
Yeah, a little forecasting.
Not necessarily this time of the year, but later in the year you can say, okay, we're not going to drop below 40 degrees because that's where our dew point is. But the dew point, of course, is a measure of moisture into the atmosphere. The more moisture is, the more buoyancy there can be into the atmosphere. It's one of the key ingredients that we need for severe storms to develop. And we do expect a couple of different forms of severe weather. That very large hail, it could be 2 inches or greater in diameter as these elevated storms get going. But we may also see some damaging winds over 70 miles per hour. So we're thinking 70 to 80 potentially as these complexes of storms. And they're probably going to be at least 2 of them, maybe 3, that get together and move across this region. So not only is it possible, but it's going to be likely in some spots. So the amount of energy that's going to be available is really high from Sioux Falls to the Twin Cities down through Mason City into Des Moines, across much of the state of Wisconsin, even into Illinois. So as storms, which are developing out here, enter this environment, they can really go gangbusters and develop. Now, Chris was talking about some of the 80-degree dew points. I know Muscatine, Iowa had a dew point of 86 degrees. To put this in perspective, most of us start feeling uncomfortable in the low 60s. We consider that feeling humid or feeling muggy. And to see 79 in Dubuque, we had 80 today in places like Sioux City. I think it was 81 at the last hour. And a lot of that is actually being contributed by the corn sweat, right? So the corn fully mature and it releases that moisture into the atmosphere, which increases our dew point and that moisture. So notice a couple of thunderstorms getting started right now. The models, you know, all day long have really been pretty regular on bringing these individual storms here this evening and then turning this into a complex of thunderstorms, firing up storms out here where they are right now, just west of Rapid City, and that turning into one of the MCSs. So notice the one works on through northern Wisconsin and up towards the UP of Michigan, and then the other one, the storms that are near Rapid City right now, could be putting in a pretty rough rush hour tomorrow morning early, potentially, in places like the Twin Cities. So a lot of action can be expected throughout these areas. Tonight's going to be a rough night. Tomorrow morning could be a rough night for folks. And even if you end up in the lines of storms, sometimes we get those little kinks, just like what's happening right now, that could cause some rotation. So have a way to get alerted while you're sleeping tonight.
And we're looking at a multi-day severe weather threat here as this system, this disturbance moves across the U.S. So let's
the record's 97. I feel like we may as well bump up another 2 degrees, you know, in this next hour if you can. I'm virtually in Chicago right now. The excessive heat warning, as you mentioned, is in effect. It's going to stay in effect through tomorrow evening, and it's going to be tough because not only are we going to have the feels-like temperatures over 100 in the afternoon, we've got an air quality alert that's in effect, and we also are dealing with, you know, just oppressive conditions, really, when temperatures on the thermometer are saying right now almost 100 degrees here in St. Louis. But would you add in these dew points that are in the 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s in some cases, that brings your feels-like temperatures into those triple digits. So wherever you see that yellow color, that's where we're getting estimates of the dew point being in the 80s, which is just... it's just gross. It's about 20 degrees more than what we would start feeling uncomfortable with, right? So there you can see the triple digits. It feels like 115 here in Cedar Rapids, and that's going to help to drive these storms. We've got more heat in Chicago tomorrow, Chris.
All right.
Welcome back to Storm Center. Every day at this time, we like to take a moment to look ahead to tomorrow's trouble spots tonight. And there are going to be several of them, and at different times of the day, in fact, especially across parts of the Midwest and into the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. Notice the red on the map here. This is where we have the chance of severe thunderstorms. Could have some slowdowns in the Twin Cities early on, working its way towards Chicago and into the Milwaukee area, especially in the late afternoon and evening. A lot of humidity ahead of this. So even when it's not raining or storming, you're going to feel like you're just sweating outside. That's going to help to contribute to some of the energy that will be building with that increase in moisture, but also the heating of the day. So here's a look at the future radar showing you areas along Interstate 35, along I-94 there are likely to be troublesome. That all kind of fades out by lunchtime and works on up into the UP of Michigan and into parts of lower Michigan too. But then new storms are expected to develop along the cold front, and that's when things could hit into northern Illinois and southern parts of Wisconsin. So think late afternoon, early evening. The rush hour potentially could be affected here. Notice it really expands around Chicago over towards Gary and into southwestern Michigan into the evening hours. So the later you get, you may see more widespread rain and thunderstorms, and not just damaging winds, hail, and couldn't rule out a couple of tornadoes. We could have some flash flooding here too. So be very careful, especially on the roads. Chris?